Tonight we come to the end of Jesus' little passage, the little section that he has, talking with his disciples about discipleship and how to live a life well lived. It's one of the most remarkable passages in the entire book of Mark. Now, some of you might not know your Christian history. You might not know some of the things that have happened kind of in the past when it comes to Christians and how they've been involved in the world. But one of the odd things about Christianity throughout history is that we've really gotten a reputation, if you look at us historically, not just the last few years, the last 50 years, but since over the last 2,000 years, we've gotten this reputation, and it's pretty well deserved. The reputation is that we are friends with everyone and we're above no one. Historically, that's the Christian reputation. Friends with everyone, above nobody. The odd things about Christians, historically, has been that we didn't really pay attention to social hierarchy. We never really looked at that or cared about that very much. Back in the early church, when Christianity first started, just around the time Jesus died and rose, cities were segmented off into different social groups. As Rome came in and took over everything, you'd have much more travel, and as different groups came to different cities, what would happen is they'd build walls in the city so that each group would have their own little section, and that's how it would go. But when Christians came in, they started to cross between the walls. They wouldn't stay with their own kind. They'd sort of move around to really everyone. They were friends with everybody. And that friendship would often mean suffering for them. If you go ahead a little bit in history, the plagues in the Middle Ages, when the Black Death hit and things like that, the doctors who knew the most about what was happening, they would jet. They would leave. They would basically bounce from any city that had the plague hit it. The people who stayed were the Christians. Oddly enough, even family members of infected people would leave because they were doing a cost-benefit. And they'd say, look, they might make it if we stay, they might die, but if we stay, we're probably going to get infected. So they would leave family members to die of exposure or the Black Death or really whatever. It was the Christians who stayed behind and cared for the sick. A lot of people's lives were saved because Christians stuck around when their families left, when the doctors left. But a lot of Christians died because they stayed behind and they got infected and they died. Fast forward to the large missionary movement of the early 1900s and following. There's an old story about a guy who went to an Aboriginal tribe, and this is back before Skype and even really access to telephones and cell phones especially. So he's in the kind of the middle of nowhere of Papua New Guinea, and he's reaching this Aboriginal tribe, and they don't hear from him for several months. And well, they didn't expect to, but the months sort of added up, and so they sent someone in. They flew someone in to go find this guy. Couldn't find him anywhere. Eventually, they found his body floating in a river. His body he still had in his hand a shotgun full of 10 bullets. Something about this guy had decided it was better to keep his bullets in the gun and let this tribe kill him than it was to open fire on them and save his own life. This is one of those things about Christianity that makes what we are here so fascinating. It's not about becoming a nicer version of normal. It's not about becoming just a generally well-adjusted person who's a little bit better, a little bit nicer, a little bit more caring. It's about becoming an entirely different kind of person, completely opposite of the way the world tends to work, the way people tend to think. And the Bible sums up a lot of this idea with the word service and the word servant. Christians aren't just nice. By default, our nature is to exist for the sake of others, no matter who they are. Servants of everyone, above no one. That's what we do. And so regardless of your circumstances, whether you have money or you don't, whether you have talent or you don't, whether you have an important title or you don't, you exist as a Christian to serve the people around you. And in this last passage, in Mark chapter 10, that closes off a section in the book of Mark, we get how Jesus' death, how the gospel really connects to you living as a servant. And so when we look at the end of chapter 10, or the middle of chapter 10, where are we? Yeah, the end of chapter 10. Look at the end of chapter 10. We get three things. You'll notice I love three things. We get three things. What is Jesus going to do? Why is he going to do it? And how does that change you into a servant? What's he going to do? Why is he going to do it? And how does he change you into a servant? We're going to start in verse 32. I'm going to read the whole thing all at once. It says, and they were on the road, that's the disciples and Jesus, going up to Jerusalem, and Jesus was walking ahead of them, and they were amazed, and those who followed were afraid. And taking the 12 again, he began to tell them what was to happen to him, saying, see, we are going up to Jerusalem, and the Son of Man will be delivered over to the chief priests and the scribes, and they will condemn him to death and deliver him over to the Gentiles. And they will mock him and spit on him and flog him and kill him, and after 3 days he will rise. And James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came up to him and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What do you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." And Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized?" And they said to him, "We are able." And Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink you will drink, and with the baptism with which I am baptized you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." And when the 10 heard it, they began to be indignant at James and John. And Jesus called them to him and said to them, "You know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them, but it shall not be so among you. But whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many." This is the word of the Lord. Now, what's he going to do? Why is he going to do it? And how does it make you a servant? Start at the beginning. What's he going to do? It's in that first section, verses 32 through 34. This is the third time, all in a row, basically, that Jesus has told his disciples that he's going to die. And in verse 32, it says, they were amazed and they were afraid. They've seen Jesus do amazing things, heal the sick, calm storms, raise the dead, and they're frightened. He's walking to his death. The amazing one's going to die. And they are his followers. So what does that mean for them? They're amazed and afraid. And Jesus sees that they're amazed and afraid in verse 32. And what does he do? He gets them together and he doubles down on it. And he takes them together and says, see, we're going to Jerusalem, and I'm going to be delivered over to the chief priests and the Gentiles and so on and so forth. They'll mock me and spit on me and flog me, and after 3 days I'll rise. This is what he says. Notice that he talks about a death and a resurrection, but he focuses, all his words are about the death, except for a few at the end. He's really focusing on the death here. And he mentions it's the chief priests and the Gentiles who are going to do this. In other words, it's the respectable people. The people who are going to work across the aisle to get this guy killed. The best of the religious, the best of the irreligious, the elites of society are going to kill Jesus. The people you want to impress in the places you want to be are the very ones who are going to kill Jesus. And then he mentions the great suffering that's going to be involved. I mean, look at the detail. Flogged, whipped, spit on, beaten. This is the opposite of the death we want to die. We all know the death we want to die. You know what it is. You want to die in your sleep. Comfortable, peaceful, surrounded by loved ones, and you've gotten everything off your chest with full mental faculties and no real pain. And you want to be clothed. You prefer to be clothed when you die. You have a death you want to die. We all have the death we want to die, and it's always in our sleep. The death everyone wants to avoid is the death that Jesus is walking into. See? We're going to Jerusalem. So what's the main thing Jesus came to do? What did he come to do? What's his 5-year plan? To die. That's his plan. And he's advertising it. This is his platform. Politicians tend to run on a platform that tells you how your life will improve if you follow them, get them into office. You'll have more jobs, more comfort, more security if you follow me. Here, Jesus has a platform that says, I'm going to go into the important places in front of important people and be rejected and suffer. Follow me and you will go there and be rejected and suffer too. Now, he will rise. There will be victory, there will be deliverance and blessing and eternity and rest and no more tears. But Jesus makes very sure that we have to deal with what comes first. Take up your cross, die daily, lose your life, then find it. Before the resurrection comes the cross. And he says, follow me. So Jesus is making sure that his disciples know and that we know that his death isn't something that just sort of happened to him. It's not what happened to him after he did what he came to do on the earth. His death is what he came to do on the earth. What did he come to do? He came to die. Now, why did he come to do it? That was what's in the beginning. The why is at the very end in verse 45. At the very end of the passage, he says, for even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now, this right here addresses where we can fail to connect with the gospel, where we can be hazy on it. If you connect with this, if you grasp what Jesus is saying, you will find yourself connected to something so powerful that it will make you die with a loaded shotgun. It will make you cross city walls. It'll make you stay during a plague. It's going to make you serve everyone you encounter. But if you don't grasp this, if you don't grasp the gospel, if it's hazy, you're going to find yourself on the fence. You're going to find yourself living divided. You're going to find yourself unable to freely serve people with the sort of abandon that Christians have had throughout history, unable to really sacrifice for others. So we got to understand this. Now, why did he die? Okay, you have to understand these two things. You have to understand he gave his life as a ransom, and then he gave his life as a ransom for you. First, ransom. Today, the word ransom is a piece of paper with cutout magazine letters that criminals use to get money. It's law and order stuff, ransom. Back then, ransom was different. It was tied to freedom. Someone could buy a prisoner's freedom for a very large price. In other words, you'd pay off that prisoner's debt. You'd purchase them for yourself, and that prisoner could then go free. And so what Jesus is saying when he says the Son of Man came to give his life as a ransom, he's saying that Jesus' death is meant to pay a price that will set you free, that will set me free. Freedom from guilt, freedom from sin, freedom from judgment. In other words, he's paying your debt. He's going to take on your debt and set you free. Now, here's where you can get lost, because I know a lot of people in West LA, non-Christians, and a lot of Christians too are kind of hazy on this. The question is this: why was this ransom necessary? Why can't God just forgive us? I mean, honestly, why can't he just be cool? Like be nice, forgive us of this stuff. It's weird to tell me that God loves me and then to say he has to pay this debt because he's angry at us. What's going on here? Now, the problem is that culturally, in America, and probably all around the world a lot, we're working with a very naive view of forgiveness. Forgiveness, we think, is about forgetting something and moving on. Forgiveness is about letting go of hurt feelings and just saying that's all in the past. Let bygones be bygones, I forgive you. That's how we think of forgiveness. It's very personal, it's very internal, it's very emotional. It's not about reconciliation or like fixing things. I'm just moving on from that. I forgive you. That's how we think of forgiveness. But forgiveness is much more complicated than that. For example, imagine you're meeting a friend at Starbucks because you can't meet anyone anywhere else anymore other than Starbucks. You're meeting a friend at Starbucks and you're 10 minutes late. You're running behind. And you get there, and you come in breathless, and you sit down, and your friend looks across the table at you and says, "You should have texted me you were going to be late." And they take your phone where you crush candy and look up Wikipedia and post pictures of food, your phone, and they drop it in their latte. Now imagine next, they look at you and they say, "That was an overreaction. I'm horribly sorry that I've ruined your phone that is, of course, of central importance in your life. I'm very sorry about this. Will you please forgive me?" And let's say you're in a very gracious mood and you say, "You know what, I was late, maybe you had a bad day. Sure, I forgive you. Let's just forget about it." Well, the problem is, you're still out a phone. The debt lives on. Either someone has to buy you a new phone or you have to live without one, and come on, who's doing that? The debt lives on. Just saying forget about it doesn't put things back the way they were. There's still an outstanding debt there. Someone needs to pay for what happened. Things can't go back the way they were until someone pays. And you know the same thing's true without any technology involved. You know it's true emotionally. When someone betrays you, when someone hurts you, when someone hurts you deeply, you know that there's a debt that's outstanding. Just saying forget about it doesn't do it. You either have to take that hurt on yourself or you have to blast it back in them until you're even. That's all you can do. Someone has to swallow the hurt. Someone has to pay the debt. Forgiveness always costs. And so God, he can't just say forget about it, because the debt would still be out there. The debt would still exist. And the debt of our sin, the debt of our rejection of him and his love, is so great, so cosmic, that you can't purchase it. The Psalms say, what man can purchase his life? You can't pay for it. We're enslaved to the debt. We can't get out from under it. And so someone had to take on the debt. Someone had to take on the shame. And God did. There's a French atheist who's now a Christian scholar. It's a crazy story. His name's Guillaume Bo. I have a French friend who says I'm butchering it, but I'm going to go with that. He grew up in secular France, which is a place where really, atheism's in the water. Like, it's just this place where essentially anyone who believed anything about God at all is just immediately an idiot, just so backwards, so removed from modern society. He grew up that way, and he ended up bumping through a random set of circumstances into a pastor and a church in France. And he was looking at this pastor going, how in the world can you believe this stuff? Like, how can you not? You must just be this huge idiot. And so the pastor starts doing essentially a Bible study with this guy. He would send him little pieces of the Bible to read and have him answer questions, and the guy would answer the questions. And as he writes, this Guillaume guy, he starts to see why a lot of Christian beliefs do make some sense, like rational sense. But on every page of this Bible study, he said he wrote the same question. Why did Jesus have to die? Why did Jesus have to die? But why did Jesus have to die? This makes sense, but why did Jesus have to die? And he said one night God answered that question. And he said he answered him by reactivating his conscience. Let me read you what he said. He said, basically, he had been in this situation where he had done something that he really wasn't proud of. It was actually pretty wicked. And he had sort of lied and covered it up and buried it pretty well. Didn't really keep him up at night, didn't really think about it. And he said, when God answered this prayer by reactivating his conscience, he says, I finally saw that deed for what it was. I was struck with an intense guilt, physically crippled with pain in my chest, and disgusted at the thought of that thing I had done and the lies I had covered it with. There was no going back. I had done it, and there was nothing I could do to change that. I still remember laying there in pain in my apartment near Paris when all of a sudden the quarter dropped. It made sense. That is why Jesus had to die. Me. He who knew no sin became sin on my behalf, so that in him I might become the righteousness of God. He took upon himself the penalty I deserved, so that in God's justice my sins would be forgiven freely, by grace as a gift, rather than by me making up for it through religious rituals or righteous deeds. He died so that I may live. So at that moment I accepted the whole thing. I placed my trust in Jesus, and I asked him to forgive me in the way the New Testament promised that he would. When I took those steps, the feelings of guilt just evaporated. I experienced a sort of spiritual renewal. The guilt was gone, and I received the freedom and forgiveness Jesus promised. What happened to this guy? The ransom was paid. He was set free. The cosmic debt was off his back because Jesus had paid it. Look, if you don't have your conscience reactivated, if that hasn't happened to you, if you don't understand the guilt, the condemnation, the weight of your sin, you won't connect with this. You'll never feel really free. Because if you haven't really resonated so far this weekend, if you've just been kind of like, yeah, it sounds nice, this is kind of emotional, I guess that's okay. If you haven't really resonated, it might be because you don't think you're that bad. You don't think the debt's that big. There are so many people I know who say, well, I'm a Christian, but I don't understand why we have to focus on this sin stuff and the judgments. I mean, can't this just be about love? And I always look at them, and I try to be very gentle. I say, the minute you say that, that's how I know you don't understand the sweetness of this. You don't resonate. You don't connect. That's how I know you don't actually care much about evangelism. That's how I know you don't actually live in any other way than like Christianity is a nice add-on to your life, because you haven't seen the sweetness. That's how I know you don't have a real relationship with God, just a philosophy and some church attendance. How could you? You have nothing for him to do for you but give you some comfort here and there. You have no need for him. It becomes incredibly subjective for you. Because for you, God's not saving you from anything. It's just sort of a nice thing for you. You like the idea of the love of God, but without the sin, without the need, there's no real love. There's no sweetness without a need. There's no joy and no fellowship if it's casual. There's no satisfaction without hunger. There's no enjoyment without a thirst. There's no beautiful mercy if there's nothing really that big for him to forgive. So the gospel for you is really nice news. It's very nice of Jesus that he would do something like that. But it will never be good news. It'll never be life-changing news. It'll never be news that makes you stay behind in a plague until you see the debt, and until you see him pay it, until you see the need for the ransom. You'll never taste the sweetness. And so you have to see he died as a ransom. You have to see it really is bad. It really is cosmic debt. But you also have to see that Jesus died for you. That ransom for many, when he says it, that for, that means in place of. Jesus died in our place. A lot of people have trouble with this too, in my experience, because it's sort of like this. Imagine a guy and a girl are walking. I live near Santa Monica Pier, so we'll do that. They're walking along Santa Monica Pier, and the fishermen are all there, and the Ferris wheel is lit up. And they're walking down, and this, they've been dating for a while. And the guy sort of looks at her, and he says, you know what? I'm just so glad you become a part of my life. You're so special to me. I really just want to show you how much I love you. And he says, I'm going to show you right now how much I love you. And he throws himself off the pier and begins to drown. So don't marry that guy, A. Like that's okay, that's not a good idea. See, it makes no sense. And people think that way about Jesus. Okay, so he died for me. Thank you. I don't really understand. But imagine you had fallen off the pier. And he dives in to save you. And in the process of saving your life, he drowns. Now that kind of thing isn't weird. That kind of thing changes your life. When it's for you, in your place, it changes your heart. Things will never be the same again when someone does that for you. There was a movie made in 1992, which you guys probably weren't alive for, which makes me sad. I guess it's a classic for you then. It's called Last of the Mohicans. It should have won Best Picture, but it lost out. Daniel Day-Lewis is still around. He's in this movie, okay? So Last of the Mohicans. It's during the French and the Indian War, which is quite a while ago. And so it's about these relationships between the Native American tribes and the British and the French, who were all in the East Coast fighting this war. And so Daniel Day-Lewis is this Indian named Hawkeye. There's a British woman named Cora. She's the daughter of a general. And then there's this British soldier named Duncan. And so in the course of the war, Duncan falls in love with Cora, and Cora falls in love with Hawkeye, and there's a war, so no one's happy at all for most of the movie. There's a big love triangle. And at the end of the movie, the way the whole thing kind of goes towards the end and the climax, you have this other Indian chief who's very upset, and he has Hawkeye and Cora and Duncan, and they're surrounded by these warriors in this tribe. And the chief speaks French, and Duncan speaks French, but no one else speaks French. And so it's like a really, really heavy episode of like I Love Lucy, because like the chief's speaking to Duncan and Duncan's speaking to, that's a TV show, by the way. The chief's speaking to Duncan and Duncan's speaking to like Hawkeye and Cora, and there's this giant translation game going, but it's really heavy because the chief says, Hawkeye and Duncan, I'll let you go, but Cora's family has sins over their head. The things they've done to my tribe, someone has to pay. And there's a fire lit, and he says she has to burn. You guys can go, but she has to burn. And so Hawkeye says, Duncan translates, and Hawkeye says, tell him to take me instead. Tell him to take me instead. And so Duncan says something in French to the chief, and the chief says something back, and there's Hawkeye saying, did you tell him? Did you tell him? And Duncan says, I told him. And at that moment, all the Native American soldiers of that tribe, they grab Duncan, and they throw him on the fire, and they rush Hawkeye and Cora away. What had he done? He had said, I will substitute my life for yours. In place of, I will take your condemnation even though you don't love me. Even though I love you and you don't love me, I will still trade my life for yours. That's the idea of substitution. It's a ransom for you. It's in place of. There's a price to be paid. There's condemnation over our heads. And Jesus says, I came to take that for you. Even though you didn't love me, I came to take that for you. And why does that story touch you? It's tragic when someone dies. It's a tragedy. But it turns into something else when that person dies for you, in your place. Then it changes your life. See, this is why Jesus, dying thousands of years ago, touches you today on an eternal, on a spiritual level. He put himself in your place. Why did he die? Love. In your place, love is why he died. So that your forgiveness could be full and debt-free, so you could have the debt off your back, so you could feel free, so you could be with him, so that the cost of forgiveness could evaporate, and all that could be left is love. Now, how does that change things now? See, you have to grasp these things, otherwise it's never going to resonate with you. So if it's never on video like that, it's never going to resonate with you, but how does it change things now? We did the beginning. That was what he did. He came to die. The end, that's why he died, for love as a substitute. Now in the middle, we see how something that powerful can get in your heart and again change those deep structures and make you into a servant. So after Jesus talks about his shameful and painful death, James and John come to ask him a question. They say, Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you. Which is an audacious question. It's like, gracious Lord, could I trouble you for a blank check? It's just, okay, whatever we ask. And so Jesus is gentler than I would be. I mean, you care to repeat that? That's what I do with my kids. They say, care to repeat that? And I just stare at them. But he doesn't do that. He says to them, what do you want me to do for you, in verse 36? And then they said to him, grant us to sit one at your right hand and one at your left in your glory. See, you begin here to see how still out of touch the disciples are with what Jesus has told them. Honestly, it's kind of offensive. Essentially, Jesus has just told them for the third time, I'm going to die in this horrible way. I'm going to Jerusalem to just be absolutely crushed and mistreated. And they basically say, so can we have your stuff? That's their take. What's wrong with them? They're fixated on what it means to be with the Messiah, with the coming king, with God in the flesh. It means status. It means the Messiah meant you were on the winning team. It means being right when everyone else is wrong, and Jesus is going to Jerusalem to prove it, and we're going to be on his side. And Jesus says, no, you don't understand what it's like to be with the Messiah. He said to them, you do not know what you're asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or to be baptized with the baptism with which I am baptized? Remember the cup from yesterday morning? The cup and the baptism, they're complicated, but they point to the suffering Jesus would undergo. To the opposite of what James and John are looking for. Are you able to deal with the suffering that comes with being with the Messiah? Do you really know what being with the Messiah means? I've just told you where I'm going. Are you really willing to be with me? Will you be on my right and on my left in Jerusalem when we get there? And they said to him, we are able. Sure, why not? This is their response. Why not? It can't be that bad. He's the Messiah after all. We might have to fight a bit. It might be tough at times, but we can handle ourselves and we'll triumph victorious. And Jesus says to them, the cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant. It's for those for whom it has been appointed. This isn't in the text, but I think this is where they sober up. Because look at what he says. He looks at, they say, yeah, we're sure. And he goes, whether you're ready or not, you're going to. You'll drink the cup. You'll take down the baptism. And it came true. James and John both suffered a lot for Jesus' sake. But he says, but I can't tell you who's going to sit on my right hand and on my left in glory. His point isn't that that's off-limits knowledge for you. The point is that this isn't what you're supposed to be thinking about. I mean, imagine what it would have been like if he told them. Can you imagine what would have happened? Believe it or not, it's actually Moses and this woman named Susan from the 14th century. Really holy, that Susan. What if he told them that? What would happen immediately? Immediately you'd say, who's Susan? And you'd say, okay, we'd start evaluating. We'd start ranking in order of glory. Okay, I'm not Moses, I'm not Susan, but maybe I'm third, maybe I'm sixth. Where am I at? And that's the opposite of what Jesus wants. It's the opposite. But that's what they're doing, all of them. Look at verse 41. It says, when the 10 heard it, the other disciples, they began to be indignant at James and John, which is understandable. I mean, essentially, they're looking at them saying, wait, so you guys snuck off and called shotgun on eternity? It's not cool, man. Not cool. You can't do that. And Jesus called them to him, all of them arguing about who's greatest and how it's going to be ranked. And he says to them, you know that those who are considered rulers of the Gentiles lord it over them, and their great ones exercise authority over them. But it shall not be so among you. Whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. Look, he's saying, how are you used to kings acting? How are you used to people with power acting? What do? They make you, at some level, revolve around them so that they're more comfortable. They delegate and offload their discomfort to people below them who have less power than they do. If you want to know if that's true, just think about this. Who gets coffee in your office? And why is that? Unless you work for a startup, and then I guess you take turns in the garage. But if you work in a corporation, who gets coffee then? And why them? It's not because they have a unique skill set. They didn't go to graduate school for driving to Starbucks. That's not why. You want to know why? It's because the important people, the upper management, whoever's in power in that office, they want coffee, but because of their position, they don't feel like they should have to get it for themselves. They're just too important. So someone lower on the corporate ladder serves them coffee. And we all do this. Our comfort, our desires, it tends to run the show of our lives. And whatever authority we have, you might not have much, but whatever you do have, you tend to use to get comfort and these sorts of things while still being polite. You can be a little mean to an intern because he's just an intern, but the CEO can be a little mean to you because he's the CEO. Think about this for a moment. Where do you yourself have the most influence? Where are you the most comfortable? Where's your home turf? And do you ever use that to your advantage? What people are there on your home turf? Do you ever throw your weight around with them a little bit? Socially, financially, family-wise? Do you ever take advantage of the access, the authority, the comfort, the power you have in your life? And Jesus says to you, to me, to them, that's not how it's going to be among my followers. That's not how we're going to do things. He says, whoever would be great among you must be your servant, and whoever would be first among you must be slave of all. He's doing more than saying be nicer. He's turning our entire world upside down. Everything we think about the way the world works, he's saying it's actually the opposite. He comes in and says, don't you understand? I made this world. I created this world. You have this idea that what the world is like is sort of like people, well, yeah, you're nice to people. It's good to be nice, but still you sort of throw your weight around a little bit. He says, you're wrong. You're wrong. All these instruments on stage, one of the things about being a musician is you begin to realize how important it is that everyone plays in the same key. If people don't play in the same key, even if they're playing the right chords, they're the wrong chords. And there's this giant dissonance. And sometimes it can feel like the entire world is playing in one key, and Jesus is saying, no, you're going to play in a different key. Like the world runs this way, but you know what? Jesus says, you play in this key over here. That's not what he says. What he's saying is, the entire world plays in my key. Everyone else is in the wrong key. Everyone else is wrong. I'm right. I made it. And the way I made it, I made you to play in one key, and that key is humility and service and love. You might think it makes you stand out, like the world looks at you like you're wrong, and they do. But the reality is I'm the one who authored this place. I'll tell you what key to play in. And so Christians, Jesus says, Christians, you, me, Christians exist for other people. We exist to serve. We exist to humble ourselves. We exist to wash feet. Now, how does that look? Most of our life is lived in rooms. You kind of live your day going from room to room. You have rooms at work and rooms in your house and rooms in the church and rooms with your friends. And wherever you go, you're in these rooms. And the question you have to ask yourself, the question you have to answer in any room you enter is, what am I here to do? What am I here to do? And in reality, you already have an answer to that question in every room you came in. You came into this room tonight, and you have an answer to that question. You might not have it conscious, but you have an answer. And one of the ways you can tell how well someone has internalized what Jesus did, has internalized Jesus dying as a ransom, is if they walk into a room and say, I'm here to serve the people in this room. That's one of the ways you know the penny's dropped, and the gospel's in there. Now, you got to understand, we tend to think of that as like an either or. Like you either come in to be served or you come in to serve. But in reality, it's a little more subtle than that. I think we all know that. Rarely do people walk into a room and say, ha-ha, I am here to be served. Peel grapes, serve me, fan me. And no one does that. Everyone knows you can't do that and get away with it in society. People will want to feed you some insecurity. They'll want to drop you down a peg. It won't work for you. Usually you're more subtle. You have different purposes for coming into the room. I'm here to get things done. I'm here to accomplish something. I'm here to enjoy myself. I'm here to get ready for the next place I'm going. My day is this part is one link in a long chain of my day, and if this one gets disrupted, everything else falls apart too. It can get really psychological. You can walk into a room thinking, I'm here to validate myself. I'm here to feel better about who I am. It can get really pragmatic. I'm here in this room at work because I need to make money so I can eat. And Jesus says, look, while you might be getting ready for something, while you might, be there to learn something or to accomplish something, while you might be there to make money so you can eat, the most fundamental thing you are there to do as a Christian in every room you enter is serve. To honor God by serving. In a room full of people, as a Christian, what you do is you look around and say, what am I here to do? I'm here to serve you. And that's revolutionary. It's absolutely revolutionary. And it's not just rooms. It's your car. I'm in West LA, so I use a disproportionate amount of driving illustrations when I preach, because that's what we do in Los Angeles. We spend a lot of time on the road, and we sit in our cars. And when you drive, you're there to serve. Can you imagine? And you say, no, I'm here to get from one place to the next place. I'm here to go from point A to point B. Well, yes, you wouldn't be driving if you weren't trying to go somewhere, given. But you're there to serve. And your response, if you're like me, your response is, but these people don't deserve it. Exactly. Yes, see, now we're getting somewhere. That's the rub. This guy drives his flashy car, and he thinks I'm going too slow, so he passes me, but I'm gonna speed up just enough to let him know I'm still there, and then he's gonna be stopped at that red light. I'm gonna go up slow next to him so he can see that he didn't have to speed by me, learn about light staging, man, save some gas mileage, see what's up, man. You should be ashamed of yourself. See, that's what you do. That's what we do. Maybe that's just me. I'm pretty sure it's you too. You're there to serve. You're there to serve. Now, how in the world do you get there? See, the hard part about the Bible is it commands you to live in this incredibly upside down way, and then it refuses to let you fake it. Like 1 Corinthians 13, that famous chapter. If I give up my body to be burned, but I have not love, I gain nothing. If I sell all I have to the poor, but I have not love. It basically says, that you can give up all you have for the poor and not love the poor. You can give up your body to be burned for God and not love God. And you can do the same with serving. You can serve without serving. You can serve selfishly. Look, if you don't do the dishes, because that's not your job, you're throwing your weight around, yeah, you're not serving. But if you are doing the dishes, but the whole time you're angry and you're thinking, my roommate should be doing these dishes, there's a chart on a refrigerator with her name on it, and she's not watching the chart. And you're serving, but you're not serving. And if you're doing the dishes and you're thinking to yourself, wow, it is so good that someone as amazing as me is here in this apartment to do these dishes. What would they do without me? You're serving, but you're not serving. You're not serving. You're faking it. You're serving in those moments for what you can get out of it. And that's how the world sees service and morality and humility. That's how the whole world looks at the things that we're called to do out of our heart. You do them so you can be a good person, or at least so you can look like a good person. You do them so you can lead a balanced life. I mean, charity's a good thing after all. It's very healthy to have an element of service to your life. If that's what you're thinking, you're not a servant, you're a mercenary. You're serving just for whatever you can get out of it. Service was the price to get what you want. And if it stops getting you what you want, you'll stop serving. You'll be out of the game. And so we're in a bind here, and I hope you see that. How do you get out from under that? How do you find authentic service if you can't just grit your teeth and do it, if you can't just fake your way to it? And that's what you get here. That's why we need a crucified Jesus 2,000 years ago. That's why verse 45 is one of my favorite verses in the Bible. For even the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. That for is the best word in the whole passage, because that word is because. All this is because the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve. It's all because he came to live as a ransom for you. I got this set of preaching instructions, years ago now, and this older guy said, look, you'll never go wrong if every sermon you have basically the same 3 points. Here's what you're called to do. Here's why you can't do it. And here's how Jesus did it for you, and by dying for you now enables you to go with a changed heart and actually become the thing you know you want to be. 3 points. See, some people look at Jesus here, and maybe this is you, and you say, wow, that's a really inspiring example. It's super exciting to see someone serve that way. But an example on its own isn't sufficient. The example doesn't have the power to get you to live that way, to be that way, to act that way. The example won't get you to die with a full shotgun. The example won't get you to stick around in a plague. You need more than that, and Jesus doesn't stop at being an example. He goes on, see, I'm going to Jerusalem, he says. He'll do whatever is necessary to make it possible for you. And because he died as a ransom, if you trust in him, you're different now. You're changed now. You have the capacity to serve now. There's still room to grow, but you have that ability. And you won't serve because you have to. You'll begin to serve because you want to. Because you want to play in that key. You want to live in that upside-down kingdom. Because you see, that's the only... What else would you do when you see what he's done for you? When you walk... Look, why do you and I walk into a room with another agenda? Why do we have these other agendas out there that drive our lives when we go into this room and that room and that room? Isn't it because... It's because you feel like you have a lack. You feel like whatever your purpose in that room is, it can make up for the lack you have. It's because you aren't satisfied. You aren't secure. You need to control the situation to get the right outcome for you. Isn't that why the Gentiles lorded over others, like Jesus says? The more power you have, the more leverage you have to make sure that life turns out the way you need it to, the way you want it to. And that's why you serve others only as much as it benefits you. And that's why, as long as it gets you where you want to go, you'll keep serving, but no further than that. But that's not how Jesus served you. That's not how he served you. See, when you understand that Jesus died willingly for your sake, why he died for you, then you'll see how far he's gone. The things that he's done, what he's done in saying, I will serve them even if it gets me nothing. And God looks at Adam in the garden and he says, obey me, and I'll give you eternal life. And Adam won't, and neither will you. And here, God looks at Jesus, the Father looks at Jesus and says, obey me, and I will crush you, and I will give you an eternity of hells to suffer. I will give you all of my wrath poured out on you, and I will turn my face away from you. And he does. And he does. Willingly. For you and for me. And when you see that, see your heart melts, and the Holy Spirit gets in there, and it reforms you. It enlarges your heart, and it pours the love of Christ into you, and you'll be changed. And you become a servant. And all of a sudden you walk into a room and it doesn't matter if they deserve it because you didn't deserve it. It doesn't matter if you lose control serving people because you never had control to begin with. But he did, and he used it to die for you. It doesn't matter if it costs a lot because it cost him everything, and he still did it. You ever forgot your keys and you find out they're in your pocket? I mean, you turn the place upside down. Some of you wear glasses, like they're on your head. And you're unzipping couch cushions, and you're undoing all your bed covers. And where do these things go? And you get frustrated and a little frantic because you can't function in your day without the keys or without the glasses. You can't see, you can't drive, you can't do anything until you find these things. And you realize you had them the whole time. You didn't need to be so frantic. You could have just accessed them and used them. Jesus died as a ransom for you. Hear it from the Bible, hear it from me. If you trust in him, you have what you're looking for. The keys are in your pocket. He put them there. Don't look for your keys somewhere else when you've had them the whole time. Don't come into a room looking to be served when you have his service at your disposal. Don't spend your life frantically searching for something Jesus has already given you. It's not a life worth living. And now that you have him, you can walk into any room, anywhere, and say, I'm here to serve. Why? Because you're free. Because you have him. My chains fell off. My heart was free. I rose, went forth, and followed thee. Amazing love, how can it be that thou, my God, would die for me? To do something for others joyfully, like to die with the shotgun, to stick around during the plague, to cross the walls, it takes more than grit and determination. It takes more than lofty ideals. It takes knowing what God's done for you, knowing why he died, and realizing that frees you. And so the why of Jesus' death, the ransom, it pulls you from the life of John and James into the life of Jesus. And you see it at the end of the book. Because at the very end, guess who's nowhere to be found when Jesus is in Jerusalem? James and John. They wanted to be at his right and left in his glory, but they left during his suffering. They left him all alone. They all ran away. We all ran away, but he didn't. He didn't run away. He didn't come to be served. He came to serve and to give his life as a ransom for all of us who ran away, all of us who served ourselves, and the debt is lifted. And you become a child of the God who serves, and now we serve because we can. And when you start to worry and wonder, how can I serve? How is this going to possibly work out for me? How can I give this much of myself away? When you start to walk into rooms and think to yourself, they're going to take advantage of me. If I give away this kind of money, if I'm this generous, people are going to find out and they're going to take advantage of me. If I give away this much of my time, people are going to find out, they're going to take advantage of me. If I give away this much of myself, of my love, if I'm serving people so much, they're going to step on me and take advantage of me. I'll never have anything to myself. And you'll start to pull back from loving others truly and serving others truly. You'll start to pull back because you think, no, I need something to myself. I need to hold on to something for myself. I need to get my dreams and my goals and my aspirations. I can't give everything up for him. When you get frantic and start wondering where you left your keys, look in your pocket. Put your eyes on things above where Christ is, seated at the right hand of God. Because that's where your life is hidden. And it's coming for you. And because you know that, you can be a servant to all. Above no one. A servant to everyone. It's what we do. It's who we are. Because it's who our God is. It's what he's done for us. And so we serve. Let's pray. Father, make us servants. Make us servants. We are not servants like you. We struggle and we strive after things that don't last. We have idols that come in and grab our hearts and pull them in various directions. We come into all sorts of different rooms and we look to leverage them for our comfort, to take advantage of the people who are there so that they can serve us, even if we try and make sure no one knows that's what's happening, even if we try and make sure that we don't know that's what's happening. And yet you would come into this little room that's our world. You'd be born in a room that's a barn. You would humble yourself, divest yourself of your riches and your glory and your life to serve us. Let us serve, Father, not out of guilt, but out of joy, because our life is now hidden with your Son. We thank you for this. We pray you'd make us servants. Show us where we ought to serve. Show us how we ought to lay our life down. And show us most of all how you've given us everything we need to be fully satisfied, even while we sacrifice by sticking around in plagues, by dying with loaded shotguns. Let us be servants like you and live in your upside-down kingdom, we pray. In Jesus' name, amen.